It's not just Antifa lunatics, unfortunately, who have completely lost their minds, lost their ability to reason in the era of Trump. It is all the way up to the top reaches of the government, as we've seen with Comey, James Comey. The guy's just a weirdo and the most sanctimonious and slimy and dishonest person to work the FBI in a very long time, maybe ever. But you've seen this in very powerful positions, people that have a lot of sway, that have a lot of reach, who are they're completely unreasonable what they're doing. They don't care about the damage to institutions, to the broader society. They want to get Trump people or Trump himself, and everything else is secondary to that. I bring this up because of the news today out of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. The initial two out of three of the initial federal judges who looked at this in D.C., to their credit as actual jurists, as people that believe in the law and not making sure that they are treated well by left-wing, law firms and the D.C.-based media, people that don't care about what's said about them at cocktail parties in Georgetown, which are real. I know people say, "Oh, what about the Georgetown cocktail party?" That's a real thing that happens for the fancy people in D.C. They knew that it's a very straightforward situation with General Flynn at this point. The government, the prosecutorial arm of the government, dropped its case. Okay? Dropped the case against Flynn. Said this should not have been brought. This was wrong. Judge Sullivan, who is the federal judge on this case, said, well, hold on a second. What do you mean you're dropping the case? Clearly he hates Flynn. He's already shown himself to be a Flynn hater when he accused him in court of being a traitor, which no one on the prosecution side had ever said. I mean, that's like he was watching a Rachel Maddow monologue and was like, oh, I'm going to bring that into my courtroom. Absurd. He's guilty of lying to the FBI over nothing. That was and he's not even guilty of it, but I'm saying that was the initial guilty plea. Lying to the FBI. It had nothing to do with being a traitor. His phone call to Kislyak was completely fine. Didn't break any laws. Well within the scope of his duties. Nothing wrong with it. Zero. Libs don't care. So you had 2 out of 3 judges that said that he needs a writ of that Flynn should get a writ of mandamus. A writ of mandamus is an emergency order to vacate a court proceeding. So it's effectively like, this is done. Like, we're out. Shut it down. Shut it down. No, Judge Sullivan doesn't want to shut it down. He wants to keep on forcing Flynn to show up to court, to pay legal fees, to face possible federal prosecution. And 2 out of 3 judges said you can't have a criminal proceeding without a prosecution. You can't appoint as a judge some left-wing buddy of yours, some lib, which is what he did. This former judge Gleason appointed him to argue the side of the prosecution when the prosecution, which is a government, an executive branch responsibility. This is a separation of powers issue. The executive branch came in and said, well, we don't want to do that. This is not a good prosecution. We're dropping it. A judge, which is the judicial branch, as we know, has appointed a buddy to be like, you're now the shadow prosecutor. We're going to pretend that you're prosecuting this case on behalf of the government. He has no authority to do that. This is eradicating separation of powers. This is crazy. If this stands, then a judge could always just say, I'm going to appoint somebody and they're going to declare that, that you're being prosecuted. Show up to my court. What? It's a complete outrage. This is not a close call situation, my friends. And the Democrats say, but he pleaded guilty. Democrats argue for people to be exonerated, for the government to have to overturn the sentence decades after cases where they were on tape, giving a confession with relatives present, and overwhelming evidence of guilt. They'll say, oh, that never should have happened. But here, because he was forced into a guilty plea by the government lying about the evidence that it had, which it's not supposed to do. It's a Brady violation. Because of all of that, what? Where does this leave us? Oh, let's just continue to see if Judge Sullivan should be able to call into question the federal government's motives for dropping the case. That's what this is going to be. This is going to turn into an anti-Trump hashtag resistance carnival. That's what they're going to do. That's what Judge Sullivan wants to do. He's got his buddy in there, and they're going to make this whole thing about how, the Mueller probe and Russia collusion and Flynn and how he was the center of this. These people they're completely nuts. They lose, and they don't accept that they've lost. They were wrong, and they don't accept that they were wrong. They push forward with it anyway. And that's exactly what they're doing here. So what ends up happening? And now it just continues on. I always tell you the process is the punishment, and that is exactly how the libs have approached this case against Flynn for months. Just drag it out. Ultimately, what they're going to do, I think, the real nuclear option from Judge Sullivan's perspective, would be to sentence Flynn. He could still try to sentence Flynn. He could do it to prison. Judges have once you're in their courtroom, their authority is really unchecked. And if you have an appeals court full of Obama appointee libs, which is what the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals has, you can get no justice whatsoever. Flynn is a target of the left, and they will, like a terrier with a bone, they will not let it go. They will not let it go. This man is innocent, did nothing wrong. Guy served his country for over 30 years in the military. They don't care. Ruin his life, bankrupt him, destroy his reputation. They don't care. And so what will they do? They'll see if this Judge Gleason, former Judge Gleason, who has been appointed by Judge Sullivan to stand in for the prosecution, that the federal government, it's not like the federal government says, yeah, we don't have the resources, or they said this was a bad prosecution, drop it. We no longer want this case to proceed. What could be more clear than that? Can you imagine you're a judge? Imagine you're a judge and you have a defendant in front of you, and you have the prosecution, the federal government, the Department of Justice from the highest level comes forward and says, we drop the case. You're going to still prosecute this person? That's what's going on. You think that there's justice in America? Unfortunately, in the era of Trump, no, there is not. Because of the deep state Democrats, there is not justice. This is a grave injustice. There's no good faith argument. You just had 8-2 federal appeals court justices in D.C. by 8-2. The only two that realized the writ of mandamus should be granted here were the ones that were on the 2 out of 3 panel. When they went en banc, which means the entire appeals court, all the judges in the appeals court in D.C. have to hear it and then rule on it, 8-2. Crush this motion. So, and this only happened because Judge Sullivan, instead of accepting the initial appeals court decision, pushed it to the max. Said, I want an en banc hearing. I want to hear from everybody on this one. And this guy has gone completely off the rails. Completely off the rails. But it's punishing General Flynn. And Democrats won't stand up for him. They don't care about the injustices going on here. They don't care this is an innocent man that they've ruined. If anything, they're upset. This is really, for them, the only high-level scalp that mattered to them was General Flynn. Yeah, Paul Manafort, but Paul Manafort was kind of he got fired from the campaign. He was clearly kind of a sleazy political operator. No one, that's different than the former DIA chief who's a 30-plus year military veteran and combatant. And the incoming national security advisor, that's a much bigger deal for them. And this is really all they had to show for all the Mueller prosecution. The only real political points they scored were entrapping Flynn with this FBI thing, which was all James Comey's move. That's who James Comey is, a disgusting piece of you-know-what who will entrap you with federal lying to the FBI charges when you are the national security advisor of the United States, entrap you on a nothing burger, and it's not even clear that he lied. That's the other part of this. It's not even like they got him to lie. They didn't think he lied. The FBI didn't think he lied, but then later on they said, well, the Mueller probe came along and said, we got to get this guy. Let's tag him. They got him. Where's this all heading? I've called this all along. I hate to be the one that says, I was right about this, but I am right about this. I told you after the initial appeals court ruling came down, the 2 out of 3 saying the writ of mandamus should be granted, that this would go en banc, and then it was, probably not going to go Flynn's way. He's got a bunch of Obama appointees on this circuit court circuit court of appeals rather, and they want to make a point of punishing Flynn to the maximum. No one wants to step forward and say the Flynn prosecution was unjust because they'll be hated by libs forever, and they know that. No one wants to come forward and say it. I mean, who's a lib? So what happens now? The Supreme Court hopefully will be asked to grant an emergency stay And the Supreme Court will have to come in to the picture here. And you know what that means? You'll probably get a 5-4 decision. I think you'll get a 5-4 decision. I think the stay is likely to be granted, and then you'll get a 5-4 decision eventually from the Supreme Court that this is wrong, and they'll say that it was all partisan and political. If I'm wrong, and maybe they go to the sentencing phase, or they try to maintain the guilty verdict against Flynn and say that he's sentenced to time served, but he's now a convicted felon, you know what that's going to trigger? Trump will pardon him. And then they'll say that was political. They're trying to force this into a position where they can claim that it's the Trump side of things that has abused the law and been political, and they won't let it go until they at least get that. They've already ruined Flynn, so they've accomplished that in their minds. Good job. These people are barbarians, okay? They don't care what they do to human beings. They don't care about the laws they violate and what they're willing to abuse to get their way. They've already gotten that against Flynn, but now they want to make sure that the narrative for their side becomes, well, we did everything we could to ruin this guy, but it was only because of Trump with his pardon, another corrupt pardon for a Trump crony like Roger Stone, who was commuted, not pardoned. It's only because of that this guy didn't end up with a felony record. They just want to make sure that he's a convicted felon. They want to keep that. Trump's incoming national security advisor, convicted felon. And then in years past, they're already doing it. They're making movies. They're totally rewriting history. Totally rewriting history. Delusional. Utterly delusional. But this is what we're up against. We live in a country now, unfortunately, increasingly defined by dishonesty and lies. And it's very hard to win when you have so many millions of people, tens of millions of people, who will just believe it all, and it becomes an article of religious faith. You know, what the New York Times says in its editorial pages must be true. And if you deny that, if you argue with that, you undermine the sense that some of these libs have that they're really sophisticated and wise and brilliant and everything else. That's the stakes for them. They're never going to accept that they were fooled and swindled by all this. It makes them feel good to hate Trump. It makes them feel like they're really accomplishing something by posting the most vicious anti-Trump nonsense possible on their social media platforms, by thinking that Russia stole the election. Which, really, think about that. What an incredible feat that would have been if Russia was able to manage that. It's not an easy thing to do. By putting a little propaganda online, it's really, my friends, we live in an era of mass delusions on the left, and it's increasingly difficult to maintain your own moorings on reality because they have all spun off into another planet. I don't even know where they are anymore.
Over the next 4 years, we will make America into the manufacturing superpower of the world. That's happening already. And we will end our reliance on China once and for all. We'll do it here, like we used to do in the good old days before we owed trillions of dollars. We will hire more police, increase penalties for assaults on law enforcement, surge federal prosecutors into high-crime communities and neighborhoods, and ban sanctuary cities.
That's the Trump agenda going forward. He can articulate it. He can make it sound compelling. He can make it sound like something that we would all benefit from. What's the opposition sound like on all this stuff? What do you hear when you're supposed to have those moments of believe in Biden, right? When you're supposed to have all of that, what exactly does he say? He's going to unify the country? That's laughable. No one really thinks the Democrats are going to unify the country. The message of unity is what? Donald Trump doesn't listen to science? We don't listen to science in New York. That somehow gets left out of this conversation. The science would tell us, based on the metrics that they were using, that we should be completely open for indoor dining, that gyms should have been real, and this should have happened a long time ago. Meanwhile, Mayor de Blasio is trying to say that maybe there won't be indoor dining until the spring of 2021. He's just going to destroy this city. That's his plan. And that's Democrats' plans all along here. They're so angry. They're so full of rage that Donald Trump was able to win the last election. They won't let it go. There's a big part of them that really believes that the country should suffer, that the country deserves to be miserable, and it's getting what it deserves this year because it elected Trump. I'm sorry. It's there. You can see it. You can hear it. You sense it. We need to be punished, the Democrats think. And then they turn around and say, oh, no, we want to be a uniter. We want to bring everyone together. That's, of course, preposterous. No one really thinks that that's their position. No one really thinks the Democrats are planning to do that. But that's their pitch. And they can't have anybody challenging it because it would be so weak in an exchange, let's say, on stage at a debate with Donald Trump. Here you have Kennedy, Senator John Kennedy, saying that he thinks Biden should take Pelosi's advice on the debates. Play 8.
That's the category I put Speaker Pelosi's advice in. I hope Vice President Biden takes it, because if he takes it and doesn't debate, he's a walking dead man politically. American people aren't going to vote for a president without seeing him. You can't stay in your hidey hole. You got to get out and see people and debate. And I think the Speaker's been tripping to think that the American people are going to tolerate having a party nominee not debate for the most important, powerful job in the world. But having said it, the politician in me says, well, I hope the vice president takes the Speaker's advice.
Biden's going to have to debate. If he were 10 points up everywhere and they were really, really confident, maybe he could get away with it, but he's going to have to do it. The same way the Democrats have seen that they're not politically invincible by backing a bunch of building burning, cop attacking and hating maniacs, that can actually have negative consequences for their power, for their chances to win an election. I think that they have a recognition. I think they understand that if they don't debate, it's not possible to make a case that Joe Biden is a serious person, right? If you're running a presidential election like this and you're seeing this happen, or you're following this presidential election and you see that one candidate is afraid to debate the other candidate, you're going to vote for that person? Now, you might say, Buck, 49% of the electorate will vote Democrat if it were a write-in candidacy of Mickey Mouse for the Democrat Party. I know that. But if you're talking about the people that are still deciding, and I'm always amazed that that's a thing that still is there, but people have busy lives and don't focus on politics all that much. But if someone's an undecided and they hear that Joe Biden is really doing the weekend at Bernie's presidential campaign, they're not going to come forward and vote for this guy. There's no way. No way. It just shows the whole thing's a fraud. And it is. The whole Biden campaign is built on lies and a fraud. Trump campaign is built on, see what I've done, I'll do more of it. COVID's passing. We're going to be better. It's going to be all right. It's time for roll call. Roll call time, everybody. Thank you so much for staying till this part of the show. I know for some of you it's probably your favorite part of the show. Facebook.com/Buck Sexton. Team Buck at iHeartMedia.com. That is how you send us the messages, or on Instagram, Buck Sexton. And remember, the best way to get into the roll call action is by starting off with producer Mark is a handsome patriot genius, and then it is likely that they will end up in our roll call.
I want to point out that's not true.
Okay, but it's still...
If you say that and then you put some crazy stuff underneath that, I'm not putting you in.
Okay, producer Mark apparently has standards, so you can't just say that and get,
who knew?
And then get anything in. But I'm just saying, if you want to flag it for his attention, it's never a bad move. Facebook.com/Buck Sexton, Team Buck at iHeartMedia.com. Like I said, Instagram too. We're pulling more from there as well. If you're not following me on the gram, please do. Buck Sexton. All right, TJ. Buck, I think for Trump to win this election, it means that Republicans will also end up winning the House, similar to 2016. With that being said, one of the most important positions that we're haven't really talked about for the next 2 years to follow, hopefully 4, will be Speaker of the House. I realize this is not a position that we the people get to choose, but I think it would be helpful for House Republicans to know who we the people would prefer. With that being said, who are we looking at for the next Republican Speaker? Well, TJ, you're a little more optimistic than I am. I don't think we can count at all on winning control of the House. I think that's going to be a big ask. I think we'll be lucky if we hold on to the Senate, and obviously if we win the presidency too. So it'd really be a continuation of where we are right now. As for who I think would be the next Speaker of the House, I got to think on that one. I would love to have Jim Jordan. I think that'd be fun. I think Jim Jordan would do a great job. Right? Put the libs in a half Nelson. He'll show them what's up. I think that Jim Jordan would be a really, really excellent choice. There's some others that I'm sure would come to mind if I gave it some thought, but I'm so focused right now just on where we are with the presidential race that anything else kind of gets pushed off to the side. Mike, hey there, Buck and Mark. I heard you had a shortage of odes, sonnets, and haikus. When I was trucking down to Charleston, South Carolina today, I composed a limerick for you. Yeah. All right, here we go. Mike, very much appreciated. He writes, those pinkos continue to lie, but our Buck he will swiftly decry. A producer sublime, Mark keeps Buck on time to broadcast his show, Shields High. Mike, that's pretty damn good. Pretty good, my man. I'm gotta say, I'm impressed. That's actually a better limerick than I had anticipated. I thought you were gonna send us one about a man from Nantucket.
Certainly the best limerick we've ever gotten.
It is the best limerick, I gotta say. All right, yeah, haikus are always kind of meh. Limerick is better. Matt. Buck, thanks for having such a great show. Well, Matt, thank you for having such great taste. I listen every day via podcast. I'm continually trying to get my girlfriend interested. Good call, Matt. A challenge, but good call. I'm writing to request your assistance in putting more pressure on Governor Abbott of Texas, who doesn't seem interested in Texas being free anymore. He has a statewide mask mandate and has closed bars with no end in sight. He says we need to get test positivity rates down under 10%. Before he'll allow freedom again. But when less people go to get tested, possibly because they're not sick, he says we need to step forward and get tested more. Friends, this is the confirmation bias that we keep seeing in all these different policies about COVID. They have no idea what the hell they're doing. It's all total nonsense. One thing that just came out over the weekend is that PCR testing is so sensitive that it can actually sometimes test dead virus particles from a previous infection or very, very few virus particles from an infection that was never even really clinical in level and degree. And so this is the newest reporting on this, the newest science in this. They're concerned that there might be a lot of people who are testing positive for COVID who either had it a long time ago and never even really got very sick with it, and or are not possible for them to be infecting other people with it. So, everyone keeps saying, "Oh, the testing." I've always said testing as a strategy to control this makes no sense. It takes 14 days to get your test results back in New York. Up to 14 days. A week is standard. How's that going to help anybody? Especially if you're talking about asymptomatic cases. If you're asymptomatic, what are you going to get tested every week? It doesn't make any sense. This has really shown us how inept and how stupid our government really is. I'm just going to say it. And that the government can't protect you. It's not your friend. It does not keep you safe and warm at night. That is our job here in the Freedom Hut. We keep you safe and warm at night. Matt says, I'm active duty military and have no choice but to live here at the moment. But if I were in a position to leave this state and go somewhere that believes in freedom, I would. Thank you for all you do. Well, Matt, I appreciate what you're saying, my man. But if Texas isn't freedom enough for you, where is there really to go? I mean, I guess I'm going to Montana. Snow Princess and I are going to Montana for the weekend. Woo! I have never been to Montana. And I always think of that line, I wish I had seen Montana. From, what's it from, everybody? Come on. Or maybe it was, I would have liked to have seen Montana. I think that's what he says. I don't know. It's close to that. Hunt for Red October. Sam Neill playing a Russian. Not particularly convincingly, but it's a great movie. Probably the best submarine movie of all time, for whatever that's worth. And, he would have. So I will have seen Montana. I will have seen Montana. That was as of a week from now. So I don't know how much Team Buck Montana we've got. I know we've got some. So if you see a swoop, if you see a poofy-haired freedom fighter walking around downtown Bozeman this weekend, it is in fact me. So come over and say hi. Give me a high five. That's right, high five. Hand to hand. We'll be okay. We're not gonna die. God, everyone needs to calm down. People like to do this thing where they touch my elbow. I don't want to touch your elbow. You can high five or handshake, or we can wave at each other. I'm not doing this elbow touch thing. It's just it's weird. Weird. Greg writes, "Hey, Buck, I used to have a lot of respect for George W. Bush. I was there as a sophomore in high school in 2001 when I was in the Rose Garden of the White House as he gave to my family the Congressional Medal of Honor for my great uncle who died as a helicopter pilot in the Vietnam War. Yes, it's Trump's party now, but the fact that George W. Bush can't even make an appearance or a vote of confidence for Trump makes me realize that he is part of the swamp too. It is very disappointing." Yeah, I wish that Bush would put the Republican Party ahead of his own personal feelings here, but he won't. But also, look, I think that Bush is a guy who. He's never really recovered from being president. Look, he wasn't really ready for it. He really wasn't ready for what he was handed. And I think that in retrospect, you look at the job he did and, handed us over to 8 years of Obama, 2 wars that, still haven't ended. Was not good. It was not good. A huge amount of big spending stuff going on. Efforts to reform or get the budget under control, unsuccessful. Open borders, basically, really bad. The Bush family is terrible on immigration, and that's been known for a long time. They really like to have things very porous at our southern border. So, yeah, the Bush era, we were all united in the fight against the jihadist lunatics who were trying to destroy our society and cut off all of our heads on video, so to speak. But Bush era was not great. Not great. Matt writes, "Hey, Buck, I've been talking with an old classmate of mine that went to law school about the Rittenhouse case. He thinks one thing will hurt the kid, the misdemeanor. According to Wisconsin law, being engaged in any criminal activity, like being a minor with a deadly weapon, cancels out self-defense. I see why he thinks that will get the kid, but the footage is clearly self-defense, and I still think the actions of the rioters will play a part in this case. What do you think about this? Keep up the great work, Buck. Shields high." Matt, I think that you're looking at this the right way, and this is what I was saying too when I was talking about him last week. I mean, I think there is a case for self-defense. It looks like self-defense to me, but they'll get him on some of these other things, and I don't know the specifics of Wisconsin state law about whether, bringing a firearm to a protest or to a volatile situation like this when you're 17 years old and you brought it across state lines. They're going to get him on some of those things, and then it will be, well, he's a criminal, so he was a criminal using the weapon then, and it just concocts a narrative that goes badly for Rittenhouse. I think that from what I saw, Rittenhouse did engage in self-defense, but, if he's not allowed to have the gun and he has it, they're going to get him on that. And also, I just don't think, as a 17-year-old with very minimal or no training, to show up and try to help other people. I'm not saying I don't respect the intention and the desire to help and stop criminality, but in the real world, you're putting yourself in obviously a precarious situation. It's one thing if it's your own home, your own business. You got to do what you got to do, right? You're going to stand on that rooftop or stand outside in your own doorwell and say, I'm going to fight, but. He's put himself out. He's put himself at legal risk. That's a separate thing from the ethics of this one way or the other. I'm talking about, though, he's put himself at legal risk because of this. And you've always got to be thinking about that because they will use the system for maximum political advantage, as we see. They'll always do that. John writes, "Buck, a recurring theme on your show is whether New York will recover from bad management, the lockdown, the riots, and the looting. Be assured that it won't. The damage is terminal. New York is the next Detroit. Keep up the good work, Jack." Thanks, Jack. Really inspiring stuff for those of us who are stuck here in New York. Producer Mark, what do you think?
I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah. I had a feeling you didn't think he was wrong. Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. There's a part of me that thinks that, I don't know. I want to be optimistic about it, but Florida's still there. Florida's still there for us, and we got to get registered to vote down there so that we can make sure Florida stays red. I'm worried about it.
Somehow I don't think that's going to happen before November.
That is true, unfortunately. For the next election, though. All right, more roll call. Just want to remind everybody, I'm going to be out this week, Thursday and Friday, but please do tune in to hear my man Mike Opelka, who'll be taking over the show for at least one, if not both. Oh, wait, is it Slater or Opelka, Mark?
It's Opelka this week.
It's Opelka this week, okay. So the Godfather is going to be in doing his thing, and I'm going to be taking off to Montana with the Snow Princess. She's not, in fact, from Montana, even though I think it does get very snowy there. Different place. But, yeah, we're going to go check it out. So I'm actually taking, and Producer Mark, aren't you as well? We're actually going on an actual time off from work.
Yeah, I'm going to be off as well. It's the first 2 days off I've gotten that haven't been a holiday since, I don't even remember when, maybe January?
At least.
February?
Yeah, since this year. This year for sure. I'm excited too, man. I'll be off a couple of, because then after that, I told Producer Mark that he needs to be prepared for limited sleeping and also very grumpy Buck as we just work our brains out until the election. So that's the way it's going to happen.
I'm always prepared for grumpy Buck.
You got to be. You got to stay out. You got to keep it on your toes, buddy. Aaron. Hey, Buck and Press Secretary Mark. Love your podcast and love Tallulah. I have to tell you that our 2-month-old Thomas, eyes get wide, and he looks around with curiosity whenever he hears, "You're in the Freedom Hut." Our older kids tell him that he's in the Freedom Hut all the time. So while our kids are definitely Rush babies too, you are forming your own brand of informed patriots. Thank you. Also, loved your interview with Inez Stetman the other week. My older kids are headed back to Catholic school today. We are so thankful. Shields high. Well, Aaron, thanks so much for introducing your family to the Buck Sexton Show. That's very, very kind of you. We appreciate that. Inez and her husband have both been friends of mine now for many years, and she's great on the school issue. And we'll have her back on soon because, yeah, we're going to Labor Day. Everyone should be going back to school, right? Nope, going to be a lot of Zoom. Going to be a lot of this going on. So, yeah, we are thankful that you listen to the show and you enjoy it. And if I'm in the company of Rush Limbaugh in your family's lineup, I couldn't be any better than that. So if you listen to Rush and Buck, I got to say, you got the best taste possible in radio. So there you go. You know, that is what it is. David. Hey, Buck. Carlton the Doorman is not a mythological figure. There's a show clearly before your time called Rhoda. It was a spin-off of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. In it, Rhoda's high-rise apartment in New York City has a doorman named Carlton. When she's called on the building intercom and answers, "We hear, this is Carlton, your doorman." You need to see an episode to understand my reference to Producer Mark. No, David, I'm not saying you're wrong, man. I'm just saying I've never heard of Carlton the Doorman, and neither had Producer Mark, so we'll have to check this out. The Mary Tyler Moore Show was a little before my time.
We got a ton of emails about that.
Did we really?
Yeah, like 5 of them explaining who Carlton the Doorman is. I understand it because I'm always heard but never seen, so I get it.
I gotta tell you, that's a new one for me. Who else from you know who I was told that I reminded people of and even looked like a little bit when I was in high school? You probably know this show, I think. Pacey from Dawson's Creek.
I do not know that show.
I'm just telling you, that's what people used to say. I actually was at a couple of house parties back in the day when I was like 17, which is a very long time ago now.
A little bit.
And oh, you looked at it? Yeah.
Oh, wow, he's played by the guy who was Charlie in the Mighty Ducks.
Wait, really? I was a Mighty Ducks? Look at that. I didn't even know that. Maybe I can get Snow Princess to watch Mighty Ducks with me. I've never seen. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
She says thumbs up, so I think we might be able to do that. I've never seen it, and then I could tell you. I did like Miracle, which was your other, like, not even you like demand. You're like, you have to see Miracle. It's insane.
Well, of course.
It's about crushing the commies. And you were right. It was very good. I enjoyed it. So I will check out Mighty Ducks and give my full review. Until then, my friends, please make sure you pass the buck. The single most helpful, most wonderful thing you can do for us here in the hut is to get someone new to listen to the Buck Sexton Show. Someone in your life, just share it with them. Tell them about it. It's on Spotify, the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts. Until tomorrow, Shields high.